Hello, a very good day to all of you, and welcome to our webinar on assuring the rewards of generative AI. My name is Marco Kortman. I'm the strategy leader for Cognizant Quality Engineering and Assurance Practice. And I'm joined today by Chirajeet Sengupta, managing partner at Everest. Before I give the word to CJ, I would like to introduce you to today's topic and also to some housekeeping rules. So as you might experience yourself, today's IT and business landscape is getting more complex and with a faster time to market is demanded. Then if you add cloud, more demanding customers and new regulations into the mix, it pushes enterprises even further. And now we add AI and Gen AI to the mix. And AI is all around us. And you will probably use ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. Personally, I like to create music with Udio, create paintings with DALL-E or with Gemini on my phone. And other people might use Cursor or Toby or Kite for translation or for development. If we look at the industries itself, uh, we have self-driving cars. There is AI and Gen AI in manufacturing, in fraud detection systems, and of course in all the IT and QA processes itself. What does that mean for us? So AI assurance is getting more important, and because there are more challenges. And to explain you those challenges, so if you're testing and monitoring AI, we have to address the data, we have to address the bias. And AI will take wrong decisions as the data is incorrect or the algorithm is biased. But now if we look at Gen AI, it adds more complexity because Gen AI actually creates new data. So we have to assure that the output is predictable, transparent, consistent, and above all, does not hallucinate or create incorrect new answers. And to give you an idea, to summarize, if you look at traditional QA and testing of non-AI applications, if you would execute the same test in the same environment without changes, you would get the same result. For Gen AI applications, this is no longer true. It will be completely different. As Cognizant QEA, we have methodology and tools to assure the model, the data, and the trustworthiness of the Gen AI. But this alone is not enough. AI implementations have to be covered and managed at the enterprise level. That's why we asked Everest Group to execute a study on how to assure the benefits of AI implementations and how to position the role of QA within your organization. So again, before I give the word to CJ, some housekeeping rules. In this webinar, we will share the results of the studies, but we also want to hear from you. So on the right side of your screen, you can ask your questions. Feel free to ask because the questions are not visible to all, so cannot be related to you or your company. I will address then the questions to CJ in the QA session. We also have some interactive polls. They will also appear on the right side of the screen, so please answer those polls. And this call will be recorded, as many clients also requested if we can record the session. So thank you very much. I will now hand over to Chirajeet Sengupta, managing partner at Everest, responsible for this very interesting study. CJ, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. You really set it up beautifully. And thank you, everybody, for taking out time to join us on this discussion. Um, we really we are very excited today to talk about how QA has a role not only in managing the risks, but thereby also assuring greater rewards to the modern enterprise coming out of generative AI investments. A little bit of context about the study. And so we started out with some interesting hypotheses. We really wanted to understand what adoption looks like, but when we looked at the nature of adoption, what we really wanted to understand was how far are we as a community pushing the envelope? Are we really trying to get disproportionate rewards? or are there risks holding us back in terms of generating higher rewards from generative AI investments? And so, really, how do we balance this dilemma between risks and rewards? Um, and if there are certain risks, which all of us agree there are, how can we design around it? How can we take care of that as part of our strategy and not have to deal with that risk after the fact? Because the reality is that AI and Gen AI really accelerates everything, good or bad. So it's very difficult to put toothpaste back in the tube, but it's much better to design efficient risk mitigation strategies so that we can derive higher order benefits from Gen AI investments. And finally, and very critically, what role does the quality assurance function have to play in managing this risk reward trade off? So it's been a little bit of a labor of love, and I'd like to thank the Cognizant team for commissioning this study, but also the Cognizant client community and the broader enterprise community from Everest Group and Cognizant, who supported us, shared their inputs very generously with us, gave us their time and their experiences, which allowed us to put together the results of this research. So we spoke with more than 200 senior technology leaders, more than 75 senior business leaders, and we studied more than five large enterprises at significant level of detail in terms of their journeys, their experiences with generative AI, what are the lessons they have learned, right? And based on this, what we discovered was quite interesting. So, first of all, generative AI is the hottest investment theme probably in today's world. So, one out of three enterprises that we surveyed and spoke to are allocating more than 5% of their total IT budgets for planned Gen AI initiatives. That's a very significant number. On the other hand, 86% of them actually agree that they aren't fully prepared to handle the risks. And the risks are fairly well documented. There are a lot of well documented public instances of the failures of generative AI and the risks coming to light. And these open up legal risks, these open up brand risks, these open up operational risk, customer experience risks for many, many different organizations. And it's almost on a daily or a weekly basis, we get to hear of some story or the other where something has gone wrong, either because the design was wrong, or the data was wrong, or the model was hallucinating, or in some situations, it could be just human error. For example, in this Samsung story that we see. So there has to be a bunch of measures that are needed to manage these risks. Now, the question is, what is the impact of these risks on enterprise adoption? And if we really look at it, what we did was we tried to look at some very broad use case categories across the risk reward benefit. And what we saw is that most of the action in terms of what has actually been implemented fall in the green bucket. So they're relatively lower risk, but they also constrain the potential rewards that a company can enjoy from those use cases. So a lot of the use cases that we are seeing being safely adopted are around summarization, are around efficiency oriented use cases. Can we do things a little bit faster? Can we do things a little bit more with a little bit more productivity, rather than doing something which involves decision making, right? And that a significant reason for that is the perceived risks, and the risks are significant of moving to higher order use cases. And which brings us to the interesting point that, and it's a rather philosophical point at some level, which is that what AI and generative AI is really about? Is it about just doing things which we could always have done. It's just that we are doing them faster. Or is it about doing things very differently or doing very different things and getting to better accuracy, better quality, better experience for our customers? And in many situations, even reimagine what new business products or services could look like. So, and we firmly believe that the technology, the fundamental technology of AI and generative AI is very powerful, but that's really not what it is meant for. So while we have studied the broader community, we'd also like to hear from you. So we have a poll question where we want to understand what are the objectives that you are looking at when you are deploying generative AI technology. Is it improving customer experience, or is it improving productivity? Is it improving speed to market? Is it improving decision making capabilities? Is it innovation, or is it cost reduction? So, our audience, you would see the poll coming up on your screens. Feel free to click on multiple options because different organizations can have multiple of these objectives across different use case categories. I'll give it a few seconds to see the results. And then we are going to see where this group stands in terms of their adoption patterns. Um, Marco, are you receiving the poll responses? Can you talk to us about what the mood of the market is right now?
It's it's coming in. Just give me a moment.
Sure.
Give some people some more time to fill in the answer. Improving productivity has the highest score coming out of the poll. Is that in line what you expected?
It's very much in line because what we are really seeing is a lot of the focus of generative AI driven use cases is really around efficiency. So it's cost reduction and productivity improvement, which is what we also received when we looked at when we did a research with the broader community. So it's very consistent. Um, Moving on, right? So the real question is, how do we create a vision and how do we create a strategy that allows us to move from productivity, speed, cost reduction to growth centric use cases and growth centric applications of AI and generative AI? Can we get to better decision making? Can we get to faster, better innovation? Can we understand our customers better, right? And thereby, can we create products and services which meet their needs better, and thereby differentiate ourselves as a business? So it's not surprising that everybody starts with efficiency, but what we are trying to do and what we believe we should try to do as a community is try and push the needle from left to right. The efficiency is something that we can get better at, but can we explore more growth centric opportunities? And what we saw was that the critical issue that stops a lot of companies from exploring these growth centric themes is the perceived risk. Because what happens if we get decision making wrong? What happens if the model hallucinates? What happens if we create reputation risk with our customers or with regulators? And these are very valid risks. And Only 2 out of 5, so roughly 40% of enterprises that we studied, are somewhat matured in their risk mitigation investments. However, those companies derive on an average 25% higher benefits, in not only in terms of productivity and velocity, but also customer experience, right? And it's very interesting because all of those companies could be trying to experiment or trying to scale similar use cases. But the what separates the ones which get disproportionate benefits from the same use cases versus the others does not always really lie in a different tool set. It does not lie in something which is core to the technology all the time. But almost inevitably, what really differentiates these companies is that they have more mature risk mitigation strategies, right? Um, and when we looked at what they do differently as part of their risk mitigation strategy, we found three interesting themes. And these are the common themes that we found across all the mature companies that we spoke about. The first thing they do is they start with generative AI risk management as a core enterprise agenda. So it's not just the function, it's not just the job of one team or one function. It's not just the job of the team that's developing the use case, that's going to be consuming the use case. It really comes right from the senior executive level. And there's a very strong firm level company level guidance and strategy that is developed. It's an enterprise wide agenda, it's not a team level agenda, and it really all starts from there. And I can't really overemphasize the importance of it coming right from the very top. The second thing, which is very interesting, is that all these mature companies, inevitably, what we saw is that they bring in the quality function. They also, there's a very strong correlation between a mature quality function within the organization and a strong culture of quality within the organization, and mature risk mitigation strategy for generative AI. So, and we'll talk more about it, but every company which falls in that mature category unanimously told us that yes, we think of the quality function as critical to manage the risk around generative AI. Um, the third part of it is really, it's not just enough to involve the quality function, but how do we measure it? Do we identify the right set of metrics? And we have the tools, the processes, and the methodologies to measure it on a consistent basis, not just at the point of time of development, but also on an ongoing basis. And we always say that you can only expect what you can inspect, right? And in this situation, the ability to inspect the outcomes and the discipline to continue to inspect that outcome on an ongoing basis is very important, because one of the key things about all AI and generative AI technology in particular is that it's not a static technology. It keeps learning. It goes beyond the training phase. It's about the data, that how realistic is the data to the current context of the function or the team that is going to be using it. So it requires a very ongoing model of management and governance. Um, and if I were to put this in perspective or go a little bit deeper in detail, right? So spoke about quality, the role of quality, and we also spoke about the fact that AI risk mitigation is an enterprise agenda. And what we really mean by it being an enterprise agenda is that, it's a little bit like what they used to say about sales. Sales is everybody's job. AI and management of AI risk is really everybody's job. And if we think about what mature companies are trying to do across the plan, build, and run phases, there are multiple teams which play a role in different phases. That role becomes stronger or not so strong in different parts of that cycle. But really, there are multiple teams which need to come together and swim in the same direction. So typically, we have a central risk management function. So there is a risk and compliance function. And what we see mature companies do is the AI risk mitigation strategy really starts with the risk and compliance function. So it's typically the chief risk officer who starts building the architecting the strategy around risk management and lay down the guidelines, right? That typically that role becomes very important at the plan phase, but that doesn't really play out very strongly in the run phase, for example. On the other hand, there is a central AI team. And typically, the central AI team, the job of the team is to ensure that the guidelines and the guardrails laid by the risk management team are being consistently followed. And that team has a role to play across the entire value chain. However, that central AI team may not always be able to get into each and every use case, each and every project, right? And have the wherewithal or the visibility to get into each and every solution at each and every stage on an ongoing basis, which is where the AI project team comes up, right? So the team which is actually building the solution. And these teams are the executionists. And the AI project teams have a critical role to play, particularly during the build phase as well as the plan phase, because they have to ensure that they are aligned with what the risk management team has set out as the strategy and what the central AI team is responsible for overseeing. Whereas the quality team, and what we have seen in every organization which generates higher ROI from AI investments, is that the quality team has a critical role to play not only during the build phase, but on an ongoing run basis. Because again, we have issues around model drift. We have issues around bias and data coming up later. We have models needing to be retrained, right? And the ability to monitor outcomes on a continuous basis becomes a critical skill set and a critical capability for the quality team to be able to ensure that we are mitigating the risks on an effective basis. Um, so our second poll here for everybody, and if you can just push the poll out to our audience. And the question we have for you is, how does your quality function support your generative AI adoption? Is the quality function not involved at all? Is our approach currently exploratory? Are we more involved in creating technical capabilities, or are we more involved in providing domain oversight for generative AI use cases and initiatives? Or are we actively managing generative AI outcomes on an ongoing basis, right? So let's hear it from you. And once again, Marco, I'll lean upon you to let us know the answers as they come along. We'll have it for another 10, 20 seconds or so. Marco, just give us the word when you're ready.
Yeah, but I'll still give some time for people
Sure.
to put it in, because people might have a small delay. Yeah, I got the results in. Exploring potential quality assurance approaches is the number one. But also developing business regulatory expertise for generative AI is the number two. So we definitely have a difference in, say, companies that are a little already maturing and using the QA functions, and people that are more in the initial stages. I think also in line with what is in the survey of your study.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there is a progression that we see in many companies. So everybody starts out with an exploratory approach, right? And then we typically see companies moving into, there's an emphasis on the technology aspect, but there's also an emphasis on the business and the regulatory aspect. So how do we bring process awareness? How do we bring domain awareness? And how do we test for the output aligning with that domain and regulatory context in our industry? That is where we see a lot of mature quality functions put in a lot of emphasis. Okay. Um, Moving on, so we spoke about this analysis that we did around best versus the rest, right? So, what do beginners do, or what does the average company do versus what do matured companies do? And we found four important differences. So, of course, the headline for us as a group of advisors and practitioners on quality is the role of the quality engineering function to assure generative AI applications. On the other hand, it's not just about assuring the applications, it's also about a few other aspects. So one of the most important aspect is skill and talent development, right? And that is true not just for other teams, not just for other business and technology teams, but it is also very true for the quality function as well. So if the quality function has to get good at at assuring generative AI applications and outcomes, we need to enable our teams to be able to do that. Um, the second point that I really want to emphasize is this point around clear governance and accountability. So again, we see a lot of organizations facing challenges in terms of how do we define who is responsible for it, right? And how do we define that early enough? And we really can't emphasize the need for defining it early enough and establishing ways of measuring it. Because again, once things go out of control, it's very hard to pull them back. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the things that, from a quality standpoint, the quality assurance teams also need to be able to measure. Finally, a very interesting observation that we had was that um, the most mature organizations think about this problem and this opportunity in ecosystem terms. They don't just think about themselves, they don't just think about their company or their data. They are very proactive in terms of networking with that ecosystem, be it regulators, be it technology partners, be it their peers, sometimes even their direct competitors, right? But I think there's a big mindset shift to be learned in some of those situations where we are really trying to figure this out together as ecosystems rather than trying to solve for everything ourselves. Um, Finally, I spoke about this earlier, but literally 100%, and each and every organization which falls into that bracket of generating 1.25 times higher benefits, each and every one of those organizations told us that the quality function plays a very significant role in assuring the rewards of generative AI. Moving on. What does this really look like? And I'm talking about the role of the quality function in managing the rewards. So we took an example, and this is an illustrative example of use cases in banking. And banking is a complex industry. It is a highly regulated industry. And we looked at a set of use cases, some of which are relatively low risk, like summarization and extraction. Some of them are pretty high risk because you're really taking business decisions based on them. and the rest lies somewhere in the middle. And if you think about all of those use cases, there are a set of quality challenges associated with them. So we have issues around inaccurate or poor training data, be it in biasness, be it in terms of completeness. We have issues around how do we secure that data. We have issues around hallucination, and then we have to test the outcomes that are generated by AI against bias, right? So it's not just enough that the data itself may or may not be biased. Sometimes that doesn't always come through, but then you also have to revalidate that through the outcome analysis, right? And if you look at that row which says evolved row of quality function, yeah, we see a completely different set of capabilities around quality assurance that that were not so mainstream just a couple of years back, right? So we are really talking about evolving the role of the quality function to test for things like hallucination and explainability. We're talking about ensuring that the outcomes are accurate and in line with what we desire and expect. Not only that, the data itself needs to be generated in a lot of situations. And we are also talking about things like bias testing. And what we find is that some of the best practices that we see is a lot of organizations which are developing these capabilities successfully. They have a strong quality management system. They invest in quality as a continuous function, not as something which comes in during the development cycle, but something which continues beyond production. And those which are able to do some of these things successfully, they reap significantly higher benefits in terms of experience, customer experience, and consequently brand reputation. But also, and this is very interesting because what we see is when organizations engineer their quality processes for AI and Gen AI to focus on customer experience, and they are actually able to be very solid about managing their risks, that actually leads to higher velocity at scale. Whereas on the other hand, where we see companies just trying to move things very fast and just focus on improving the productivity without really thinking of the risk mitigation aspects, two things happen. One is they find themselves constrained in looking at a wider set of use cases, more higher order use cases. And beyond a point, it becomes hard for them to sustain that velocity without breaking something. So it's very interesting because all of us face a lot of challenges in terms of driving higher velocity, but velocity at scale is really an outcome of also having the right risk management strategies and the right quality strategies. Right? So how do companies which are able to manage all of this, what do they do within their quality function? So what we discovered is that many companies have different ways of talking about this. They have different initiatives, they have different terminologies. But when we try to bring it all together and understand what are the common things that they do, two things stood out, right? They really train their quality teams very well, and they get access to superior expertise and superior skills, and they continue to invest on them aggressively on an ongoing manner. That is what we call train. The second is they are very strong when it comes to governance of outcomes, and they predefine a set of outcomes around data and model, which they continue to monitor on an ongoing basis, right? And these are the two things which if we believe that if companies focus on as part of their quality initiatives, and they continue to focus on it very seriously over the foreseeable future, I think this is something which really enables a lot of companies to be on the right track. So, for example, how do we train our people to test for adversarial prompts? How do we evolve our quality function in terms of skills and tool sets and methodologies around testing for data security and privacy? How do we bring in tools which can test, generated AI generated content for issues around copyrights, around accuracy, around potential for causing harm to our stakeholders or our customers. So those are just a few examples. On the other hand, how do we measure that we are doing those things well? So how do we set up metrics to ensure data accuracy and data coverage? How do we ensure that we are measuring things around model accuracy? And over a period of time, we also believe that as the technology matures and adoption scales, we'll also need to look at things like how much are we actually moving the needle in terms of compliance coverage? Are we reducing the number of incidents? Are we ensuring that our models are up to date with our current reality? So a lot of these metrics will also mature over a period of time. And what we really need to ensure that we are continuously looking at all of these things. Um, so if I have to summarize all of it, what we really believe is that there are three big takeaways from all of this. Number one, AI and managing AI and AI risks is everybody's job, right? So it's not just the regulatory and compliance team's job. It's not just the central AI team's job. It's not just the product development team's job. It's not just quality assurance's job. It's everybody's job. It really takes a village to get there, and this is highly multidisciplinary in a lot of ways. The second point is really that risk management and quality goes hand in hand. This is not just two teams coming together, but it is also about two cultures coming together. A culture of high quality leads to better AI and generative AI business outcomes. Finally, this is not a one-stop shop. This is not just about this current project or the next quarter. The whole beauty of AI is that it learns. That is really why this technology is so powerful. And learning is a continuous process, and we need to be able to keep in step with that process to be able to assure the outcomes and generate benefits on a continuous basis. So it's a long-term commitment that organizations must make in terms of assuring the quality of generated AI outcomes. There's a lot more of there's a lot more details, and we'd love to welcome you to go through some of it. Let me stop here, hand it over to Marco, and then we are going to get into Q&A briefly.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this really interesting presentation. And I read the report with full enthusiasm because we need guidelines, we need help. I have some background noise on my so we need help, we need guidelines, we need to structure this. We cannot do this as quality assurance alone. We cannot do this as risk management department alone. This is really the enterprise responsibility to drive AI in the right way. And for everybody, the full study is downloadable from the cognizant.com/QEA website. And there also will be a pop-up on your screen on the right side with a direct download button. And I already received a lot of questions from you, but I want to invite you to ask some more questions to CJ, because we still have 18 minutes to address those. So I will get the questions on my screen and address them. So please feel free to ask some questions, and let me start, CJ, with the first question I received. Um, Somebody asked, okay, what are the most critical risks that enterprises should consider before implementing a Gen AI?
A very good question. I think risk can be thought about in a number of different ways, right? But I think at the end of the day, risk is really about probability of something going wrong into multiplied by what happens when something goes wrong, right? That's the definition of risk. And I'd really think about what is the magnitude of something going wrong, right? So is it massive regulatory fines? We live in an age where a single tweet can decimate a company's stock price, right? So I think wherever the risks are around customers, partners, extended external ecosystem, regulators, right, the business impact of that risk, that's where we'd urge great caution. The second thing that I'll say is, why do some of these failures happen, right? I think the most common thing that we see is, or I'll say three most common things. The first is what is the objective, right? And I've seen situations where the objective was framed around velocity, and consequently, you just did a lot of very wrong things very fast, right? So having that very clear understanding of what we are trying to achieve is very important. The second I'll say is the data quality, right? And data quality is not just for the POC, it's what do we have the data quality if we want something to scale, because that's when we need to use real data, right? And the third is, do we have a methodology to ensure that the risks are taken care of, not just now, but 3 months from now, 6 months from now, right? So those are the three things that I'll say are most important.
Yeah, there was some background noise. So, okay, hey, thanks a lot, CJ. Other question. What shifts have you observed in enterprise attitudes towards generative AI in the past year?
That's a good question. I'll try and answer this. So I think um, in 2023, right, we were seeing massive interest in generative AI experimentation, right? Um, i- our research tells us that 85% of those experiments didn't make it to a production environment, right? And unfortunately, many companies ended up wasting a lot of time, resources, money, energy on those experiments, right? I think in 2024, we are seeing a significant shift in attitudes where people are thinking about, stronger prioritization. Does it make business sense? Does it create business value? And a lot of companies that I talk to, what they're asking is, can you show me where it has worked in the past? And are there examples of where some of this has worked in the past? And if that's the case, it gives them a lot of confidence. So there's a lot of peer networking and peer learning which is happening, which I think is a very healthy sign of maturity. But let me ask you that same question, Marco. What are you observing when you talk within your ecosystems?
No, I think it differs a lot depending on maturity of clients, maturity on say where they are. If you really see that um, some clients are really looking at those risks and maturing, and others are not. But what happens everywhere is the question is popped. So the topic is addressed everywhere, and that's why we also thought it was important to have this webinar and also have the paper to actually increase also the needs and the answering for people to look at that, because that is definitely, and then the survey also gives some different answers, so there you see the differences, but the topic is everywhere, that is for sure.
Yeah.
Um, another question. It's also about the risks, but people indeed, and those people also have to look on say where they are, because can you share some early warning signs that an organization Gen AI strategy needs reassessment? So companies that already started, but apparently, are there any warning signs where you say, okay, oh, we might not be on the right way?
I think the biggest red flag, right, is actually pretty easy to spot very early on, right? The biggest red flag is where uh, you do not have complete alignment of what we are trying to achieve out of the strategy or the particular project or the particular use case, right? And that is a big challenge because, and from an organizational standpoint, I kind of understand because a lot of these things are very multi-stakeholder. But we need to have a clear understanding. What we're trying to do? Are we trying to innovate, and that is our number one objective? Are we trying to save some money? Right? Is that the number one objective? Because everything cannot be of equal importance. And the moment we get into this thing of, yeah, we want to do this, but we also want to do that, and we are not quite sure which one is more important than the other, to me, that's a big red flag right at the strategy and planning stage, right? Um, the second uh, red flag I will say is that when we don't have a good business case and not about what happens now, but what happens if the volume of usage increases to where we really want it to go, right? Because
Yeah.
the business case often doesn't work quite the same linear manner, right? So those are the two biggest warning signs that I would call out.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have also seen examples where especially the AI implementation, Gen AI implementation in the IT or in the QA, it's going well, because it's also in a more safe environment. But that some people actually jumped by experimenting or starting to talk to ChatGPT and then develop new things also for the business applications. And so there was also, we saw one of the companies I talked to that said, okay, we thought we had governed it, but actually we meant it only for the IT and not for the business yet. We are not there yet. And I think that is also, if companies are setting it up, make sure they do it also for the business and the enterprise level, because people will jump that bridge in the organization.
Yep.
Um, okay, then if we focus more on the quality assurance part, so what is the biggest challenge that quality related enterprise, say, what is the biggest quality related challenge that enterprises are facing if they want to do Gen AI implementations?
I would say the um, biggest challenge is really in my mind around skills and expertise, right? Because these are not easy capabilities to build, right? It's an nascent market, and the skills are developing. There are no industry standard learning paths yet, right? The ability to be structured and do it for the entire quality function, right, or large parts of the quality function, that's a big challenge to do it scientifically and meaningfully so that it is a scalable model. The second challenge I will say is where does the role of quality the role of quality needs to really extend across a broader life cycle, right? In for AI and generative AI, and not many organizations I've seen are don't have that level of maturity in their quality function. So it's a different way of thinking, and you have to talk and influence to not only IT but also business, and you have to impress upon them, that quality needs to play a more extended role, right? And there are many organizations which I talk to where quality doesn't really play a very strong role once something goes live, right? But because this is so much more dynamic and things change, quality has to be embedded on a monitoring basis rather than just on an inspection basis at the time of development.
Yeah, yeah, true. There's only one question, actually, probably from a QA expert. Um, your slides address more the functional aspects of Gen AI assurance and not the non-functional parts. So assuring of the performance, security, resilience of Gen AI. Do you consider that part of the strategy, or do you consider that in another way?
No, I would definitely consider it's a very valid question, and thank you for pointing that out, right? And I think that particularly if something has to scale, right, it is very important that we look into some of that. And I think there are two parts to it. One is quality also has a role to play in the foundational, assuring the foundational elements of the technology, right? So that it is safe, it is secure, it doesn't, betray the crown jewels of the company, right? So I think those aspects are definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration as part of the strategy.
Yeah. I feel so too. And in line with that question and the previous one, fundamental changes enterprises need to make to their quality assurance approach when dealing with generative AI. They already have to track and train it, so we definitely need to train the people, track metrics. But if you would want to highlight one of those points where you say, okay, this is really where we need to make the changes to be successful.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I got the question. So is it like what is the one thing that we'd want to leave you with in terms of how do you make the
How the
change?
QA function should change, yes, to assure GenAI. Okay.
Um, I'm a big fan, and every time I talk, and Marco, I talk a lot with thanks to you and the Cognizant QEA team, right? You have always brought some of us and myself into very close conversations with a lot of your customer community. And every time I talk to that community, I walk away with the impression that not only are they an incredibly smart bunch of people, but also a very passionate bunch of people. And the questions that I hear from them is often not about the technology, it's not about the methodology, it's about people and leadership, right? And how do you influence stakeholders, right? And I think the one thing that I would really advise around the strategy is how do you influence horizontally, how do you influence up the value chain, how do you influence your stakeholders, how do you educate them about the role of quality in generative AI, and what's the value that it needs to bring. That would be the most important thing. I know it doesn't sound very strategic, but I think really that's the most important thing I think as quality leaders we can do today.
Yeah. Now, I'm talking about leaders or talking about people. Last question will pop up for today. We're talking about AI, but we're talking about assurance. But I think very interesting questions. What role should actually the human play? Had the human oversight, what should it play in generative AI assurance?
It's a good question, right? And I think you will. I think there are two aspects to this. One aspect of it is how do you use AI for assurance, right? And that leads to changes in what the human needs to do, right? And today we are focused very squarely on what does assurance mean for AI, right? And that also has a different set of implications in terms of what the human should do. But I don't think we are anywhere close. I do not believe that we are going to be anywhere close to a stage where we can safely and confidently say that we won't need a human in the loop, right? Um, I think there are two things which are going to happen, right? One part of it is going to move more upstream, so the human involvement will start becoming more and more important in the design of assurance, right? And the second thing is going to be, and I personally believe in a few years from now, with regulations maturing, explainability is really going to be much, much, much more complex, and it's going to be much more mandatory and much more, you know, the onus of proof around explainability is going to become much higher, right? And explainability is a lot more downstream. And I think so. You're probably going to see a lot of the human intervention getting a little thin in the middle, right? But the upstream implications and the downstream implications of quality and human involvement in quality, I think, are going to become very, very exciting.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot. That was my last questions. So everybody, thanks very much for joining the webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. There are some additional questions still in the box, so we will come back to you and answer those also. So TJ, thanks very much again for the survey, the study, and also for this presentation. I really enjoyed it, and everybody, thanks a lot for joining. And I hope that we can get in a follow-up discussions with you and how we can help you assuring the AI. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Marco. Thanks for having me. And thank you, everybody, once again for taking out time from your schedules to hear us today. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.